TV 2020. I am Dr. Ruchi Shah, and on behalf of Wockhardt RSSDI 2020, I welcome you all. I am glad to have with us today renowned diabetologist from Mumbai, Dr. Manoj Chawla, sir. Sir is a consultant diabetologist and director, Leena Diabetes Care Center. Sir has a rich clinical experience in managing diabetes patients. Welcome, Dr. Manoj Chawla, to the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ruchi. My pleasure to be here.
Thank you, sir. So, sir, based on your recent talk in RSSDI 2020 on a very interesting topic of time in range, the clinical implications, and comparing the Gen 2.2 basals, we would like to know from you, what is time in range?
Yes, Ruchi, thanks. I think that's a very interesting session and amongst the most upcoming topics of interest. So let me start with talking about glycemic variability. Well, glycemic variability, as we understand, is now an important parameter that we consider in our management of patients with diabetes. Gone are the days that we would look only at patients' fasting sugars or SMBG data, or for that matter, only HbA1c. We today want to see the movement of sugars through the day, and that aspect is called as glycemic variability. So time in range is the evolving metric to start looking at the overall sugar control for a person, or simply put, the amount of time that an individual is spending within a pre-specified range of sugars within a 24-hour period. So that aspect is referred to as time in range. There are clear recommendations now for the amount of time in range spent, which is considered as ideal. Amount of time that should be within a pre-specified range, usually between 70 to 180. Amount of time that a person can spend above range, if at all, which is more than 180 and more than 250. And the time below range, if at all anybody goes into hypoglycemia, the time below range that should be less than 70, or for that matter, less than 54. There are pre-specified recommendations by the ATTD group, now validated and accepted by the ADA and ESD as well.
Thank you so much, sir, for defining the time in range very explicitly. Now, the next question, sir, is there any evidence linking the time in range to complications of diabetes?
Yeah, I think that's an important aspect, because when we talk about a metric and its importance, as we understand today that HbA1c continues to be the gold standard for overall long-term glycemic control and its association with complications. Similarly, time in range today has the prospect of becoming the new gold standard metric for overall control, and hence important that for evidence-based medicine to prove any linkage with existing or with possible complications of diabetes. So there has been now published papers linking time in range, especially with microvascular complications of diabetes like microalbuminuria and retinopathy, and clear evidence establishing an inverse ratio with time in range. Essentially, the more time in range you spend, the lesser chance of landing up with these complications of diabetes.
Is there any evidence with the newer insulin for improving the time in range, and what is the clinical implication for it?
Right. So again, an important clinical question about what can really improve the time in range. So clearly today, the insulins have evolved over the last 100 years to give us insulins with better and more physiological profiles. But one of the biggest limitations of insulin therapy continues to be hypoglycemia. When we talk about basal insulin therapy, which is largely accepted as the standard therapy for initiating insulin, insulin glargine still continues to be the gold standard worldwide. However, insulin glargine also has some chance of causing hypoglycemia, and in particular, the worry is nocturnal hypoglycemia. So today, when there have been newer insulins which have been made available, the U300 glargine and degludec, they have in their phase 3 studies always compared to glargine 100 and found some reduction in hypoglycemia, especially nocturnal hypoglycemia, between these newer basal insulin analogs as compared to glargine. Now, similarly, the new metric time in range has been looked upon in terms of comparison between these insulins. So though we have evidence for glargine 300 and degludec as compared to glargine 100 in terms of reduction in hypoglycemia, the time in range studies are evolving, and you had a new study being released at ESD this year the one care study which looked at type 1 diabetic patients, and that showed, as compared to degludec, glargine 300 showed improved time in range in type 1 diabetes patients, especially in the nocturnal period. So this is an interesting aspect. We have many more studies upcoming. There is a study called In Range, again in type 1 patients, and the results are awaited. And I'm sure a lot more work will be done by my colleagues from India and all of us here, trying to look at the differences in the time in range, which is definitely going to be a metric that all of us are going to be looking more often, just as we did for HbA1c.
Thank you so much, sir, for sharing your views on this very interesting and important topic of time in range, the clinical implications, and the newer basal insulin comparison. Stay tuned to RSSDI TV 2020, brought to you by Wockhardt, for more recent updates from the RSSDI 2020. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.